So Jesus had just finished speaking of how, you might remember from last week, we need to be ready. Ready. He could come at any moment. We need to be ready. That means we need to be watching, which means we need to be doing. I was so excited Saturday to see people for our outreach. That was great. We probably doubled the numbers that we normally have. We got to go and connect with more people than what we normally do on our outreach day. It was really exciting to see that. And then during the week, there was some outreach activity taking place as well. Now, this wasn't part of my notes, so I'm going to step away. And here's where some people get nervous. I decided to leave my notes here just for a moment. I have an outreach plan, and I just want to know what you all think about it. I shared it with a few people this morning. Friday night, my wife and I went down to the square, and they had all these hot rods around the square. Oh, if you are a hot rod person or a car person, I saw them. I saw the car people there that night. I could tell which ones were car people and which ones weren't. The car people were the ones that were walking around with like drool running down the side of their mouth. Okay, they were looking at these cars in ways I never see them look at their wives even. Okay, those were car people, and this big banner, kind of letting people know what's going on, because there were dozens of really nice cars up there. Old hot rods restored, newer cars, muscle cars, trucks, all of that. And the sign said, all vehicles welcome. I got a blue minivan. It is functional. It is versatile. We were leaving the square that night, and I said, honey, wouldn't this be cool? I could bring my van up here next month, park it in line with all them other vehicles. That would be awesome. And she's, giving me that look that you wives give us, right? Wanting to be respectful, but at the same time communicate. That's a stupid idea. That kind of a look. And then it was, I think it was a God thing. Right then I realized I have a blue minivan. Pastor Taylor has a blue minivan. Delbert has a blue minivan. All three of us, next month, we could have our 3 blue minivans lined up right in a row. We could get t-shirts made up, like the Blue Van Crew or something. And it would be such a novelty. People would be stopping to be like, what are you doing here? And then we could just tell them about our church and tell them about Jesus. What do you think? Anybody? Okay, who would be willing to paint their minivan blue so you could join us? All hands are down now. Okay, we could even paint our faces blue with blue clothes, kind of like the Blue Man Crew. Now we're the Blue Van Crew. Just a thought on that. And I have no idea how to get back to my notes now. Oh, yes, we need to be doing. Okay, that's how I got off. So there's one way we could be doing. But during the week, we need to be doing something because Jesus is returning. Don't wait until you feel better. Don't wait until you have a better week. Don't wait until you get some rest. We need to be doing because he could come at any moment. Do you remember we talked about, too, when Christ returns, we might be tending to think, oh, that's okay, I'll be in heaven. I'll get caught not doing anything, but I'll be in heaven for all eternity. The Bible said in Revelation, I think it was 24, that God shall wipe away all tears. Remember, we looked at that verse. Where is that in the timeline of prophetic events? God will wipe away all tears after the 1,000-year millennial period. So whatever we're going to be feeling when God returns and we've done nothing, we will feel that for 1,000 years before he wipes away all tears. Oh, we need to be doing whatever we can right now while there's still time to be doing something. And then Jesus turns to a rather strong, pointed handling of 3 misconceptions that people make in Luke chapter 12. Mistake number 1, Jesus came to bring peace. Some people think that. Let's look at what he says. Luke chapter 12, verse 49. I am come to send fire on the earth. And what will I if it be already kindled? But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how am I straitened till it be accomplished? Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on the earth? I tell you, nay, but rather division. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one house divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. The father shall be divided against the son against the father, the mother against the daughter against the mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Ooh, that doesn't sound like peace, does it? That doesn't sound like peace and love and unity and everyone getting along and just praising Jesus all day long. There's division here. What is he talking about? John 14:27. He said, peace I leave with you, my peace. Oh, wait, this is sounding different. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So what kind of peace did Jesus bring? This kind. Peace, as it talks about in John 14. He said he leaves us peace. He gives us peace. That's peace with God. He leaves us peace of God. Let's go back and consider what Jesus was talking about there in Luke chapter 12. He brought peace, peace with God, peace of God, but he also brought judgment. In verse 50 of Luke 12, he's referring to his impending death on the cross. He said, I have a baptism to be baptized with, okay? That's what he's talking about there. He wishes that his time on the cross was already over with. If we could have verse 50 up there, please. They're going to help me with that. There we go. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how am I straitened till it be accomplished? Okay, we just reword that into our language today, and he is saying he wishes that time on the cross was already over with. His death brought judgment to the world. His death allowed sin to be judged. Romans chapter 8 and verse 3, it says, for what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God, sending his Son in the likeness of sinful flesh and for sin, condemned sin in the flesh. Because of Christ dying on the cross, sin is now to be judged. But his death also brought judgment. This is the part we like. Judgment to Satan as well. Yay, that's the good part. John chapter 12 and verse 31. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, it's a picture of him being lifted on the cross, will draw all men unto me. By the way, can I just throw this out here on this part of the verse? I will draw all men unto me. That's Christ saying, if I go up on the cross, I will draw all men unto me. I am not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. All. No one is excluded from that. Jesus died for all. Can you think of another verse? Maybe John 3:16, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, right? I just totally messed that one up, didn't I? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever comes unto him, they'll be saved. Their sins will be forgiven. He's not willing, again, that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. That's not just all the people that actually come to church. That's all that have no interest in coming to church. That's all that their lifestyle demonstrates. They're the last person that would want to come to church. Jesus is saying, I died. If they were the only person on this world, Jesus would have died for that one person. Do you remember several weeks back when we were looking at the Good Samaritan? let's not be those religious people that walked by that person. Jesus died for that person. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what their political ideology is. It doesn't matter their lifestyle. Jesus died for that person. And we need to bring Jesus to that person. His death caused men to judge themselves to be sinners. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 24, who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, Jesus, okay? So that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed. So we judge ourselves now to be spiritually dead. We also judge our flesh to be weak and prone to sin. How many of you this last week that sinned, okay, I'm not making the assumption that all of you sinned last week, because I'm sure some didn't. But how many of you that did sin had to try really hard to do it? We never have to try hard to sin. We're prone to it, okay? Romans chapter 7 and verse 18, for I know, Paul is saying, I know, this is the Apostle Paul, the great missionary, the almost perfect one in the New Testament. He said, I know in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. Oh, for those of us that sometimes think we're something special, we need to look at what Paul said. There is no good thing in me. There is no redeeming quality about me. In me dwelleth no good thing. For, and he explains it, for to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good thing that I would do, I do not. But the evil thing which I would not, that I do. Now, if I do that I would not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. That's confusing, isn't it? And I love being able to read that fast because it sounds even more confusing. Here's what Paul's saying. I want to do what's right, and I have a hard time doing what's right. I don't want to do what's wrong, and I find it so easy to do what's wrong. Paul struggled with that very same thing. Jesus came also to suffer and die. But he also came to bring division. And we read that there in those first few verses. No. Jesus doesn't cause family breakups. He doesn't cause estrangement. He doesn't cause Hatfield-McCoy issues. He doesn't cause the police to be called out to some family reunions, okay? It's not Jesus' fault there. Jesus doesn't cause divorce. Here's what he's talking about. Christ calls a person out of the world to be separate from the world. That means they're going to live in a different way. If a family continues to live in sin, doesn't turn to God and righteousness, two things usually happen. The believer in that family is called to live a life of righteousness. The rest of the family isn't. They're called to live a life of righteousness, and as believers, we are called to onward Christian soldiers, put on the whole armor of God, that concept. We are called to a warfare against sin in this world, against evil. If a member of this person's family is engaged on the side of evil, there's going to be a natural conflict there between the believer and the family member. This is what Jesus is talking about in causing division. Let's contrast these things. The family member is on the earth living primarily, this family member, unsaved, primarily living to satisfy their own earthly desires. Thoughts of God are subdued, minimized, compartmentalized. If they're a churchgoer, maybe it's just a Sunday thing. The believer is on the earth, but we're also of heaven. We are citizens of heaven. He is physical and spiritual, the believer is. And more importantly, he, the believer, is living primarily for God and his righteousness, to reach men with the glorious gospel of Christ. Anytime we live righteously, there's going to be natural abrasion with those around us that don't want to live righteously. And can I say this? It's not just saved people, unsaved people. Sometimes it's saved people wanting to live righteously and saved people that don't want to, and there's conflict and division sometimes. These two things naturally conflict: truth, righteousness, light, darkness. Our families, folks, mine, your family, they cannot be what they should be without God. It's just not going to happen. No family can reach its full potential without God. Our families cannot be looked after and cared for by God unless God is given his rightful place in the family. Without God, look, can I just say this? Letting God come visit you on Sunday morning, that's not giving God his rightful place in our families. Even if you let God come visit every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and throwing in a Wednesday night too, that's not giving God his rightful place in our families. Without God having control of the family and the decisions that the family makes, the leaders of the family make, God is being shut out. He has no say over the family. There is at that point a lack of spiritual strength that our families need to survive in this unspiritual world that we live in. Here's a second mistake that Jesus addressed. There was this misconception then that Jesus hasn't come. I would say that misconception still exists today. In Luke chapter 12 and verse 54, he continues, and he said also to the people, when ye see a cloud rise out of the west, straightway ye say, there cometh a shower, and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, ye say, there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. And then he says, ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it that you do not discern this time? Yea, and why even of yourselves judge ye not what is right? Jesus was standing right before them, and they didn't believe it. People had, and they do now, the discernment to logically look at evidence that is laid before them, and then draw what we'll call evidence-supported conclusions. I mean, we do that all the time today. Not just with the weather, okay? The way to predict the weather today is not to look at your phone. Because the weather app that I used, we should have had like 10 feet of snow this last winter. I fired them, okay? I have fired them. They lied to me. Just go outside. Just go outside. And we've got people in here that live all over the place, and I don't know your utility company, but mine, the power went out like a month or so ago, briefly, and 30 minutes after it went out, I got a text. Your power is out. Okay. 30 minutes after it came back on, I got a text. Your power has been restored. And I understand these guys on the field, they're trying to get the power on, okay? They're not worried about trying to text the office to send me a text. But it's just kind of interesting when we look at the ability that we have to discern things. These people, Jesus said, you can look at a cloud, you can look at what direction the wind's coming, and you can predict what the weather's going to be. But they failed to see the signs that pointed to Jesus being the Messiah. They missed it, and there was evidence of that. The signs that pointed to Jesus being the Messiah, they were visible signs. A genuinely spiritual person could see the signs, but the people of Jesus' day were not spiritual. They missed those signs, and people today fail to discern spiritual things. That's why it's frustrating. And let me help you if you get frustrated with this. You're trying to talk with someone about Jesus. They have questions about your church, about Jesus, about the Bible, about this, about that. And you're trying to talk to them about Jesus and to get them to understand that maybe, yes, there is a God. Maybe they doubt the existence of God even. And we try to talk to them about this, and we try to come up with a different way, a different angle to approach it so that they'll get it. We're trying a logical approach with them. And it's frustrating when we try to logic our way into someone trusting Christ. We kind of talked about this illustration this morning in Sunday school. Let's say I build a chair. Okay, I've never built a chair in my life. I'm going to build a chair, and we'll set it down right here on the edge of the platform. That makes it even better, okay? And no, I used to use guys in Sunday school. Who wants to be my guinea pig? Jeff Hackney. I'm going to have Jeff, you're not going to come up here, but I have this chair, and I'm going to say, Jeff, trust me. You can sit in this chair that I built. He's going to say, and he would be a smart man to do that, okay? So I got to logic him into trusting me to sit in this chair. So I go into detail as to the type of wood that I used. Was it a soft wood or a hard wood? And then I talk about the joints. Was it mortise and tenon, or did I just use nails, screws, staple gun? Duct tape, right? That holds everything together. Gorilla glue, duct tape. And then I talk about the space of the legs, how far apart they are, and the supports that go through. And then I go into detail on the loads versus the span and all of this engineering stuff. And I finally convince him to sit on that chair. Is he trusting me? Nope. He's not, but he is trusting all of the logical evidence. So that's not trust in me, the maker, the creator. And that's why we do sometimes people a disservice when we try to logic them into getting saved. There's no trust. They need to just trust Jesus. If we understand it and we have all the answers and we can fit all the pieces together and it makes sense, there's no trust involved anymore. Where's the faith in that? We need to just trust. People just need to trust. When it comes to our spiritual senses, here's why it's frustrating trying to logic someone into getting saved. Our spiritual senses, they're dead. The New Testament tells us we are spiritually dead. That's my roadkill on the side of the road, okay? Dead things don't do anything. Spiritually, we are dead. Spiritually, we're not going to wake up one day and decide, I'm going to be a seeker and seek after Jesus. No, God has to wake us up because we're spiritually dead. God does that. Not my logic, not my cool way of presenting something. It's God that has to awaken the spiritual senses. Man is dead, the Bible tells us. And because he's dead, he is spiritually undiscerning. That means he just doesn't get it. How many of you why don't they get it? Because they're spiritually undiscerning. They can't get it. Some people in Jesus' day had seen the signs. The weeks and ages predicted by Daniel, which they knew their Old Testament, those weeks and ages were coming to a close. This is the time. The baby Jesus had been born in Bethlehem. This is the time. There's another sign. They could see it right there. The message and the works, the miracles of Jesus were great evidence. Amazing miracles that only deity could do. They missed all the signs. They weren't spiritually discerning. John chapter 14, verse 11, Jesus said, "Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father in me." Or, I'm adding this, if you don't believe me for the very work's sake. Look at the miracles that I've done. Believe those. And then there were all of the changed lives. The choir sang about that this morning. A life brand new. Jesus changed me. Did he change you? Then changes in your lives, changes in other people's lives that you can see around you. Unbelief is without excuse. Anyone that doesn't believe today, they cannot blame it on anyone or anything else. They cannot blame it on their neighbor who they see get up and go to church on Sunday morning, but Saturday night their neighbor was out there cussing them out because they blew grass on their neighbor's driveway or whatever. They cannot blame someone else for not believing Jesus. They cannot blame the fact that, well, when I was younger, I went to church and I got church hurt. That's the term that's used today. Someone who gets hurt by an experience in a church, so they stay out of church, but it's not their fault. They were church hurt. Now that it's got a label, you know how we are with labels today. Labels excuse my choices today. Yes, sinners hurt you. And now you choose what you're going to do with that. They are without excuse. They cannot blame unbelief on anyone or anything else. People fail to discern what is right. Look at what Jesus asked them in verse 57. He said, "Why don't you judge what is right? Why don't you just judge what is right?" Here's a thought. Why do men not discern that God exists? How many of you question whether or not God exists? Glad you're not raising your hand. I would totally have to pull out some different notes. Okay. Yeah, that's why you're here. Okay, you understand. Yeah, there is a God. At the very least, that's where you're at. But why do men not discern that God exists? I don't know. In Genesis 1:1, what does it say? In the beginning, God. All creation screams for there to be a creator. There's no way it could just possibly happen. There has to be something that created it. And then for those that say, well, it did over billions and billions and billions and trillions of years. It started with this ball of gas and there was some dust. Okay, where'd the gas come from? Who created the dust in the gas? It's got to be a creator. Romans chapter 1 and verse 18. Look at these verses. For the wrath of God, there's God's wrath, okay, is revealed from heaven against, so God's wrath is against someone. We're about to see who. Against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Now, before we move on, God's wrath on people because they hold the truth in unrighteousness. Let's see what he's talking about. Verse 19. Because that which may be known of God is manifested in them. It's revealed in them. For God hath showed it unto them. Every creature alive knows that God exists because God reveals it to them, maybe not their head, but them in their soul who they are. God revealed an existence of God in them. They know it. Every living creature. That means your dog knows there's God. Your cat, maybe. Yes, cats too know there is a God, okay? The spiders, the ants, they know there's a God. Every creature knows that there's a God. Verse 20, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, that's everything, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So the question that some people may ask, well, what about people? What about people in a jungle that have never even seen a Bible? Are they going to go to hell? The Bible says everyone is without excuse. They can still believe in God without having had a man-made Romans road presented to them. God reveals him to them. So why do men and some religious people not believe that Christ is the Son of God? Yes, some religious people deny that Jesus was the Son of God. John chapter 1 and verse 34, and I saw and bear record that this is the Son of God. Okay, hold on. Religious people. I'm sorry, I just felt a little frustration coming up here, so I just had to take a breath. Whew. Religious people denying that Jesus is the Son of God. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his what? Son. Okay, I don't know. Maybe that got pulled out of their Bibles and they missed it. That whoever believeth on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Now, before we look at that very next verse, did you know there's a verse that comes after John 3:16? Yeah, we tend to focus just on that one, but this next one puts things into context as far as what we're talking about. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And now it gets even better. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not on him, Jesus, as the Son of God, is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. Wow. That's God's guidelines for who is and who isn't condemned. And it all comes down to what they do with Jesus. God gives men a warning in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 29, of how much sorer punishment, suppose ye, shall he be thought worthy, who hath trodden under foot the Son of God, and hath counted the blood of the covenant wherewith he was sanctified an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace. Why do men not discern that righteousness is the way for men to live? The Bible tells us. I mean, let's take it away from the unsaved, okay? You know, I like to make things uncomfortable. Let's just talk about ourselves. Why do we not discern that righteousness is the way for us to live? We know what the Bible says. The love of money is the root of all evil. We know all that the world has to offer. Our love and desires causes us to pursue everything but God sometimes. We pursue our love, our desires, the things we want. I didn't say bad things, just all the stuff that this world has to offer. And they're good things. We pursue all of those things, but we don't pursue God. And what happens sometimes? Oh, man, I'm starting to feel bad. I really need to get back into church. So we have our life. We're pursuing what we want in our life, and we're not committing any sins even. We're just pursuing good stuff. We're pursuing what we want in our life. Oh, we got to sprinkle a little Jesus here on Sunday morning. There, now we can go back to pursuing our life the rest of the week. Wow. What are we doing? Sprinkle a little Jesus on Sunday morning. Hebrews 10:29, how much sore punishment suppose ye shall be thought worthy who hath trodden underfoot the Son of God. I think saved people can do that too. God said to flee those things and follow after righteousness, godliness. Follow after faith and love and patience, which is hard to do sometimes. Follow after meekness, humility, grace, forgiveness. God said to flee that stuff and follow these things. Okay, we have that in black and white in front of us. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that Jesus asked almost 2,000 years ago. Why judge ye not what is right? Why aren't we discerning and making the right choices? And then he moves on to a third misconception that people make. No need to make peace with God. Let's talk about that for a moment. First, let's look at what Jesus said about that. Luke 12:58. When thou goest with thine adversary to the magistrate, as thou art in the way, give diligence that thou mayest be delivered from him, lest he hale thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and the officer cast thee into prison. I tell thee, thou shalt not depart thence till thou hast paid thy very last mite. No need to make peace with God. Jesus gives us a picturesque story here. You have an adversary, and you're on your way to the magistrate. You're headed to court. Okay? Now, based on the words that he uses, give diligence that thou mayest be delivered from him. So you're the one that's in the wrong. And this guy is hauling you before a judge. And in this presentation here, he's saying, be diligent on your way to court. Be diligent at working something out. A plea bargain, you're going to settle out of court, whatever terms we want to put to it today, lest you get to court and the judge throw the book at you. It's kind of what he's saying here. When a person has a bad court case against them, their only hope is to just reach a settlement out of court before it gets to the judge. And so it is with God. He is the judge. The hour is urgent. We know not when he returns. Man needs to make peace. You need to make peace with God. You need to give all diligence to get the effort immediately taken care of. If we fail to make peace, that person who is unsaved will have to pay the most severe penalty. So Jesus said in the story, the most severe penalty to the very last mite is what Jesus said, which is eternity spent in a lake of fire. There is a need to make peace with God. Look at Matthew chapter 23 and verse 33. Ye serpents, ye generations of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Jesus talking about hell. In fact, if you look at the Old Testament, hell is talked about way more than heaven is. More time is spent talking about hell than heaven, and yet today we don't hear much about hell. Well, Christians don't want to talk about hell. talk about heaven. And angels, golden harps, sitting on clouds with butterflies floating around in the air. Jesus talked more about hell. That's reality there. Christ in this passage is speaking to the Pharisees. Keep in mind, too, these are religious people of the day. If it was a Sunday morning, they would all be in church, synagogue, whatever. He's speaking to religious people. The most religious people in that culture, in fact. These are what we would call good people. Maybe a coworker, a friend that we grew up with in school, a neighbor. They're just good people. They're good Christian-like people. But they're not saved. And what does Jesus say? How can you escape the damnation of hell? He's speaking to these religious leaders, calling them serpents, vipers. You cannot escape hell. These good people. How can we escape? Hebrews 2:3. How shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him? How can we escape? How can they escape? Salvation. Jesus. For by grace are ye saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works. All the works that the good people do. It's not good enough. And how are they going to know it's not good enough if we don't tell them?